Given your history at assessing these sort of threats, how serious is this one from the Somali militant group?
Well, the main problem is that they can't just dismiss it because, God forbid something happens. So they have to take it seriously and look at it. But on the other hand, I think that Al-Shabaab, the furthest away from Somalia they've been able to do an attack so far is in 2010 at the World Cup soccer finals in Uganda. And then last year in September of 2013, the Westgate Mall attack, and then a couple of other attempted attacks in Kenya. But those are very easy countries for them to get to send their terrorists to with AK-47s and hand grenades, and a safe house in Nairobi was later identified by the Kenyan authorities. That's different than putting out a global warning of anybody who hears this that's on our side, go conduct an attack. Well, with that would generate basically a lone wolf or one or two maybe trying to do something like that. It would not be the planned, coordinated attack that you saw at the Westgate Mall, I don't believe. And I think Al-Shabaab is trying to play with the big boys here, like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda on the Arabian Peninsula, and show they're cool too. They can threaten the world just like the other guys do.
And we've looked at, of course, at the recruiting by this group in places like Minnesota, given the large Somali population there. What can you tell us about how they seek to recruit disaffected youth within America and within other Western countries?
That's a good point. When they were recruiting heavily and were successful in getting at least 27 young men from Minneapolis to travel to Somalia, they actually had recruiters on the ground in Minneapolis, in mosques, in the community, secretly recruiting where the families were not aware of it, the imam and the community leaders were not aware that was happening until suddenly the boys disappeared and all the logistical arrangements had been made for them. But now in the U.S., in Canada, the FBI, the local police have a great community relationship. They work very closely with the parents, with the community leaders, and with the imams to try to prevent young boys from being approached physically and then recruited even on the internet. And I think that it was the personal recruiting that really helped, because it also helped them get the arrangements to send these kids to Somalia where they couldn't do it financially or otherwise all by themselves.
And Tom, shopping malls have said they have stepped up their security, but on a national or an international level, what would be happening right now in terms of counterterrorism in regards to this threat?
Well, I think that the threats on shopping malls and other similar targets like that have been, well known to the authorities all over the world, that that's possible at any time. And, most shopping malls everywhere, especially the major ones like this one in the U.S. and Edmonton, Canada, and the shopping area in London, they have a huge number of security cameras out in the parking lots, on the highways leading to the malls, within the malls, as well as the stores that are within these malls. So there's a tremendous amount of video coverage. When they step up security, as they're talking about, what that really means is instead of having one or two people in the control room flipping screens, a large display of all these different cameras and kind of looking at them, one at a time and scanning all of them, they just bring in more people so that more cameras can be watched simultaneously to look out for something that might be happening, as well as additional plainclothes security forces inside. And I think if I could add one more thing, not to be too critical of Kenya, but in studying the Westgate Mall attack, the response by the authorities in Nairobi was pathetic. The military and the police stood outside that mall while people were being shot and bleeding to death for hours inside before they responded. And the first response was by a couple of plainclothes police officers and a couple of passerbys who happened to have firearms carry permits, who went into that mall. And that's part of the reason why that became so deadly. And, approximately 70 people were killed in that attack, because the authorities just couldn't get it together. They weren't trained, they weren't prepared, they had no discipline, and they had no leadership to coordinate the response. Unlike the rest of our countries, and that includes in the United Kingdom, in Canada, in the U.S., where the FBI here, the police train extensively in how to respond to one of these things. They're not going to be standing around outside guessing what they should be doing for hours on end.
It's a very good point. Tom Feuntes, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And as we've just mentioned, propaganda by terror groups, including Al-Shabaab and ISIS, is being used to target new recruits. 3 British schoolgirls are thought to be travelling to Syria to join ISIS. They left their homes in London Tuesday and flew to Istanbul, Turkey, a key entry point for those seeking to travel to Syria. British Prime Minister David Cameron spoke about the broader issue at stake.
Well, it is deeply concerning, and obviously our authorities will do everything we can to help these girls, but it does make a broader point, which is the fight against Islamist extremist terror is not just one that we can wage by the police and border control. It needs every school, every university, every college, every community to recognise they have a role to play. We all have a role to play in stopping people from having their minds poisoned by this appalling death cult.